Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. Lucid just reported its second quarter earnings for the 2023 year. And in that report, there were a lot of red flags that really paint a very, very dire situation for Lucid. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. In case you're not familiar, this is what the car looks like from a side view, and I'll go ahead and review some of the top line numbers that Lucid shared. As of the end of the second quarter of 23, Lucid delivered 1,400 cars. They produced 2,100 cars. They did about $150 million in revenue. They have about $6.25 billion of cash or liquidity on hand. And their capital expenditures, basically how much they're spending to grow the company, was about $204 million. And all these numbers are for the quarter. Now, if we look at some of the top line numbers from their financials, they have about $9.5 billion in assets or things they own. But here are the numbers that really get a little scary, and this is where this video is going to take a turn, unfortunately. They lost about $760 million, and they burned through about $900 million of cash. So their free cash flow for the quarter was negative $400 million, and they lost about $760 million as a total business after you take into account their research and development and other costs that are used to run the business. Now, the thing I really want to focus on here for a little bit is the net loss of about $760 million. To put it within context of what that means for Lucid, that means for every car that they delivered in the second quarter, they lost about $500,000, a little bit more than $500,000 per car that they delivered. And that's because their factories are not very efficient. They're not pumping enough cars to the factories to be able to get the cost down so they can actually make money on these cars. They lost $544,000 per car they delivered in the second quarter of 2023. Now, if you compare their deliveries and production for the last 5 quarters or so, this is the second quarter of 2022. The blue bars are the deliveries, the red bars are the production. And so the trend I want to show here is that deliveries, the blue bars, went up to the fourth quarter, and they have been in a steady downtrend since the fourth quarter of 2022. But then even more concerning is production, basically how many cars they produce each quarter, has been significantly more than deliveries each quarter for the last 5 quarters, especially in Q4. And that production rate is also coming down since the fourth quarter of 2022. So Lucid, since the end of last year, is a shrinking business, both from a production and a delivery perspective. And what's even more interesting is if you track the difference between produced cars and delivered cars since the second quarter of 2022, they basically overproduced 4,800 cars that are just sitting in inventory since that second quarter of 2022. That difference between deliveries and production, that's more than 3 times the average quarterly deliveries they've made each quarter for this year. So they delivered about 1,400 cars in the second quarter, and they have about 4,800 cars that are just sitting around since the end of the second quarter of 22. And if you do the math, that's 3 times more than 3 times more than their average quarterly deliveries. And other ways of thinking about this is that they have about 300 days on hand of inventory to sell those cars. So if Lucid stopped producing cars right now, it would take them about 310 days to purge that inventory out, given the recent trends of their deliveries. Believe it or not, there's still even more red flags from this report. It's really, it's ugly. So let's get into those. If you're enjoying this content so far, throw me a like. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Let's look at their 2021 SPAC presentation. So a SPAC is basically a fancy word for going public without having to go public. This was a big thing in 2021. There was a huge bubble that burst around it, just kind of keeping it simple. But they basically outlined some metrics in 2021 on what they thought they were going to do this year. And this is a slide from a presentation that they had. What I want you to focus on is this column right here. So this right here is their expected revenue for 2023 back in 2021. So what they thought their revenue was going to be for 2023, which was $5.5 billion. And this was, of course, to try and get investors to jump on board and say, yeah, we're going to invest in your company. Looks like good growth. So $5.5 billion was how much they hoped to generate in revenue in 2023. So what's interesting about that is that if you fast forward to 2023 now, and you look at the last 2 quarters of revenue, they're currently on pace for $600 million instead of that $5.5 billion, which is 90% less than expected. So they missed their 2021 target by 90%. on their revenue front. So let's say that again. They had a $5.5 billion target for 2023. So far, they've done about $150 million for the last 2 quarters in 2023. And if they keep doing that for the rest of the year, that's about $600 million for the year. That's 90% less than $5.5 billion. Seems like a very big miss. Now, another thing that they highlighted, this is in the second quarter of 2022, so about a year ago, they had a number out there that said installed annual production capacity, so how much Lucid thinks they can pump out of their factories in 1 year if they just produced units all the time. They outlined the number of 34,000 units as the installed annual production capacity. For this quarter, Lucid is guiding for 10,000 units produced in 2023. So they thought by the middle of last year they would have enough factory production capacity to get to 34,000. And in 2023, they think they can get to 10,000 produced. So that's 70% less than expected. So they missed their revenue target by 90%, and they missed their production target by 70% in 2023. These are some giant misses. In addition, there was a slide in the fourth quarter of 2022's earnings deck, can't even talk anymore, where they showed 28,000 reservations for their Lucids at the end of the fourth quarter of 2022. And this was as of February 21st, which is when they showed their earnings for the fourth quarter. So they said, hey, we have 28,000 reservations. And then if you look at their last 2 quarterly reports for the first and second quarter, that number is gone. They don't show that number anymore. I tried, Control F and trying to scan the document to see if they moved that number somewhere else, and I couldn't find it. So if I missed it, let me know in the comment section below. But that number is missing now. So where did these reservations go? And what gets really interesting here is that we have to remember that Lucid has overproduced for the last 5 quarters by about 5,000 units. So more than 3 times the average sales they have each quarter. And so if they really had reservations, why are these cars sitting in inventory? What's going on? What are these reservations for? Or were those reservations just they evaporated this year once people stopped spending money? Or maybe they're buying different EVs? I don't know. I would love to hear your opinion in the comments section below. In addition, in the second quarter of 2023, they show that they have about total liquidity of $6.25 billion, basically how much cash they have around to be able to fund the business. If we look at how much they reported for the second quarter of how much they burned, again, if we think back to the presentation, they burned to about $900 million of cash for the second quarter of 2023. So they have about $6 billion of cash. But in the second quarter, they burned through about 900 million of that, right? So 900 million. And so if we look this in a graphical format, just to kind of paint a picture of how big this is, the blue bar is revenue, so how much money they made from selling the vehicles. And you can see that they had that peak in Q4 and it came back down again. But you can see just how much more cash they're losing versus how much they're bringing in. So this is 0. These numbers are all negative, and these numbers are all positive. Quarter 4, they did about $150 million in sales, and they burned $900 million in cash. And you can see it's not really getting any better. A little bit better than Q1, but basically in line with Q4 and worse than Q3 and Q2 of last year. Right? So if you think about this, if Lucid is burning an average of $913 million per quarter and they have about $6 billion in cash, Lucid really has 7 quarters of cash left at current levels of sales to survive, basically. 7 quarters of runway to survive based on how much they're earning and how much they have in the bank account. Now, if we look at what they're guiding towards, some of the highlights they have on the earnings report on what they think they can do to sort of increase demand or sell more, they highlighted a partnership. Aston Martin signed a strategic agreement to access Lucid's industrial leading technologies. Not really sure what that means, but Aston Martin is a great brand, so maybe they can get something there where Lucid can make more money. And then Lucid finalized its milestone purchase agreement with the government of Saudi Arabia. With this agreement, what I see and what I'm reading is that it's for about 100,000 cars that they'll ship to Saudi Arabia over the next 10 years, I believe is the deal. And so that's the plan, is that Lucid has a partnership with Saudi Arabia where they're going to sell them cars. I don't know what price, and I don't know if they're going to be able to do it profitably. If it's at the negative $500,000 per car sold, that means that this partnership is just going to accelerate Lucid's demise, if that makes any sense. In addition to that, Lucid slashed pricing for their cars by up to about $12,000. This was earlier this week, and this was to really stoke demand to try and move more cars. They're trying to fill that gap that's very obvious where they're overproducing and they're not selling enough. But again, if they're doing this at a loss, this is just going to accelerate the demise of the company. You can't keep selling cars for a loss. That just means every time you sell a car, you lose more money. And of course, if you're going to lower the cost of a car, the price of the car that you're already losing money on, that means you're going to lose even more money when you sell your cars, right? Unless you can figure out a way to remove cost out from your business by pushing more cars. You kind of see the weird situation that Lucid is in. So the question becomes, is all of this enough to close the gap for the next 7 quarters? All of the stuff that's going on. Because believe it or not, Lucid is working on a new car that they're hoping to launch by the end of next year. And this is Lucid Gravity. Their unveil event is going to be November of this year, and it's on track for startup production in late of 2024. And a lot of people are saying this is going to be the thing that's going to allow them to make a lot more money and be able to become profitable, because people love SUVs. They don't really love sedans. This is just a huge market shift in the United States. However, the launch of the SUV is 6 quarters away. And it's pretty amazing to see that Lucid has about 6 to 7 quarters of cash left based on the current levels, unless they figure out how to generate more cash. And so you also have to think about the launch of that SUV. It's not just going to be, it's going to make money right away. It's going to be the same exact thing as with their car. It's going to take on more costs at first to try and get that car ramped up. They have to build out the factories. They have to hire the people. They have to buy the materials. And so the first few quarters and potentially the first few years of that production, Lucid's going to lose money on that SUV because they don't have another car to try and fill in the gap, right? They don't have a Lucid Air, which is the car that they're selling now, that's generating money for them to be able to fund the SUV. They're already losing money on that car, and now they're going to add yet another money-losing business on top of that. I don't know. This looks crazy. Can Lucid survive? That's really the overarching question of this video. Can Lucid survive? What is needed for them to survive? Is there even enough demand for their type of vehicle for them to survive? Especially since, those numbers are kind of scary. 10,000 produced for the year, but you've only sold about 2,800 so far this year. And if you do the same thing for the latter half of the year, that's about 6,000 cars for the year. So you have a 4,000 car gap that I don't know how you can make up. So I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. To me, it looks extremely dire. If you're a Lucid investor and you're watching this, I'm not going to give you any financial advice, but I encourage you to ask some tough questions and see if it's looking okay, right? It's just a weird situation. From my perspective, they're going to have to raise some cash to stay alive. I just don't see how they make it to the SUV without running out of cash, unless a lot of people suddenly decide to buy a lot of Lucids. I don't see that happening. Maybe the Saudi Arabian government's going to pay a premium for those cars and help them become a little bit more profitable quicker. Or maybe they have some magic in the factory that they're taking out costs and they're going to be able to reduce the cost drastically, which is going to help them reduce the cash flow, the cash burn rather. So I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't look good to my ears, to my eyes. And I would love to hear what you have to say in the comment section below. Let me know if I'm looking at this incorrectly. If you'd like to support the channel, super easy. You can just click subscribe. About 63% of you are not subscribed when you're watching this. And I love the fact that you're watching my videos. Thank you so much for stopping in. But if you would like to support the channel, super easy, just subscribe. And if you want to go above and beyond, I have merch and Athletic Greens, which is a supplement that I use every single morning, free travel packs, and vitamin D if you use my coupon in the description. And I have links for both of those things rather in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was informative and helpful, and we'll see you on the next one. Take it easy, everybody. Bye-bye.